Okay, it says preparing to live stream, setting up the meeting. We should be ready to rock and roll here in just a second. And I think we are ready to go. I see a good crowd is waiting here for us. It's the best time of year for college basketball. And ladies and gentlemen, your Indiana Hoosiers have some work to do. Now, look, they're in the conversation. They're in the discussions. And if the Hoosiers could just have put together one or two more possessions against Rutgers or Purdue, the story could be so different. But with that said, this week, Indiana may just be one of the most compelling teams in the entire country. To discuss IU's tournament chances and to break all of it down here on the Hoosier Sound is a special guest, Brian Tonsoni from Delphi Brackets and from the Assembly Call. He's going to help us walk through the bracketing process, what they're talking about in that selection committee room this week, and so much more here on episode 243 of the Hoosier Sound, where we are the official podcast of Indiana HQ. We're recording this edition of the Hoosier Sound on Tuesday, March 8th, 2022, where I am your host, Nathan Krishnan. Brian, how are you doing this evening? It's a crazy time of year, and wow, I don't even know where to start. What are your general thoughts right now on Indiana University's current position?
Yeah, it's a fun time in the bracket world. It's a fun time if you're a college basketball fan. Maybe not so much of a fun time if you're an Indiana basketball fan. But, you know, the basketball struggles are what they are. You've talked about them on your podcast. We've talked about them on ours, but they do have a resume, and that resume puts them right now, depending on who you want to listen to, either the last team in or the first team out or second team out. We have Indiana as the second team out right now. And I think the Michigan game is a definite must, obviously. Yeah. And they might need to beat Illinois as well in order to get in. They have 3 quad one wins right now. That it helps. It's not great, but it helps. They're 3-7 in quad one. They're 3-4 in quad two. We look at that combined a lot. And 6-11 is 5 games under 500 against your best competition. That compared to other teams is probably one of the lowest resume factors in quad 1 and 2. Their non-conference strength of schedule is over 300, and typically that is left out when you look at the last 4 teams in. Anyone over 300 is going to be looked down upon. What saves Indiana, Nathan, is they've played close games, and those close games keep their net at 44. Their metrics that we'll discuss a little bit later also in a solid range for teams that have been selected. And so they have that win against Purdue and Ohio State, and Notre Dame is in or out depending on who you're talking to. So they have some decent wins, and that just puts them right on the cut line. And they're going to need to win one. Yeah. There's a path for them to get in, Nathan, if they win just one. They're going to need a lot of help in that situation. If they win 2, I think it really puts them in a good position, because then they'll have 5 quad 1 wins, thinking Notre Dame stays that way. And that gets you compared to the teams that are not in the first 4, your Wyomings, your Memphises, your Michigans that have 5 quad 1 wins. And what you want to do is get close to compare. Right now with the 3, that's close to those teams. Like we have SMU and Xavier has 5. They're one of the last 4 teams in. So you got to get a couple more quad 1 wins. That's the current state of Indiana's resume. Sorry, I couldn't bring us better news.
I know. And that's exactly the place that Indiana has played themselves into right now. Before we dig any deeper, though, I know that Delphi Bracketology is a name that has kind of caught people's attention. I'm an outsider. I'm not in the bracketing world. Every so often, especially now in March, frequently, I see Delphi Bracket's name pop up. I know a lot of folks, Coach, may know you from your coaching career or from the Assembly Call. Talk to us before we really dive into the nitty gritty here. Talk to us a little bit about Delphi Bracketology, because folks, if you don't know, according to bracketmatrix.com/rankings, of any site. You can include Joe Lunardi, you can include Delphi Bracketology, you can include whoever you want. Delphi Brackets is the best at predicting the teams that get into the field. So, Coach, tell me about this organization and what you're so proud of here, what you're more excited about as Selection Sunday is just 5 days away.
Well, thank you. It's awful kind of you to shout that out. We have been able to have some success. We started in 2015. The first year we joined this Bracket Matrix website contest was 2016. We happened to win the whole thing, and we were the number 1 team and got a little CBS Sports came in to do a television thing for the Friday night show, and Gumbel was doing the narrating. Just, if you're a basketball fan in Indiana and all of a sudden there's your face pop up in between games on the Friday night of the first round of the tournament, it's just surreal. So we had some success there, and we've had success in most years. One year we were below average, and the score that you referenced, we're tied for second. But we would have been first if we wouldn't have made some mistakes in this one bad year. We were below average in 1 year. We got a lot of teams correctly in. We just didn't seed them as correctly as we normally have. So 4 out of the 5 years, we've been in the top 20 of over 170 brackets, including some professionals that we like to be ahead of. So it's a group anywhere of about 5 to 10 active students, depending each year. And we have 3 sponsors, teachers that meet, and we meet Thursday morning starting in November. We don't have time during the school year or school day. So we meet in the morning and we discuss brackets and we practice seeding teams all year long.
Yeah.
We've added some website work, some writing. We have media credentials. Students have been to the Elite Eight and Sweet 16 in Louisville. They've been to Purdue, IU games, Butler. We will have some media passes for the Big Ten. And then we do some podcasting and we do a show with ISC Sports Network here locally in Indiana. And we just got done taping that this afternoon. 2 students and myself in a studio talking sports. It's really a fun club. And we've been pretty good because we have a lot of eyes, Nathan. And so we have people constantly texting back and forth. Take a look at this. Auburn's quad 1 wins includes this or doesn't include that. And it's so much easier than one person looking at the bracket because it brings you aware of pieces of data that might matter when you have a committee of 12 that is going to be doing the same thing. When they put Indiana up on the screen and they're going to evaluate, they're going to know Rob Finnessy was hurt. They're going to know this and that. And so the more people, the better it is to kind of make the predictions. And that's why we've been so successful.
Now, hold on, Coach. Now, you said students, and I want people who are listening to this podcast to understand we're not talking about PhDs in statistics here, okay, at Ivy League institutions. All right, we're talking about students in which class of school right now, Coach?
We have freshmen through seniors in high school.
In high school.
In high school, yes.
Amazing. I mean, I wish this type of thing was around when I was in high school. I'm a little jealous. Can't deny that. But what I really like when I dug into Delphi's story was the fact that it is a group effort. And you touched on it right there. That's how the actual selection process is executed, right? Between now and the time Gumbel, as you said, on CBS announces each region on CBS at, I think, 6 Eastern on Sunday night. It's a group of 12 people. Your organization is that way. There must have been a reasonable justification behind that.
Yeah, well, one, we just answered a question in 2015. There were some students in econ. I probably should have been teaching bell to bell or something like that if my administrator's listening. But there was some downtime at the end of an econ class, and sports fans said, "Hey, where's Indiana and Purdue seated?" And I said, "I don't know. Do you think we can figure it out before Selection Sunday?" I said, "Let's meet. I'll bring some breakfast and let's talk about it." We started doing some research, started connected to fellow bracketologists who shared their thoughts. And we really owe a lot of success to Shelby Mast from the USA Today, Andy Bottoms from Inside the Hall. Those guys really shared how to do this and answered our questions early on. So, we're not here without people doing nice things for us. So, yeah, it just kind of fell into inviting students. That year we won it. We had 6 juniors and 2 teachers, and then we've expanded and added a math teacher for the data stuff, and he does a good job. And then we've added, students. It's a volunteer basis, and so some years we've been maybe down to 4 people who really enjoy it. Some years we might have 10 or 11. We got to do a little recruiting each year when we graduate some seniors.
There you go. I love the story so much. And if you don't follow them already, you head over to Twitter at Delphi, DELPHI brackets, at Delphi brackets. They don't have nearly enough followers, especially for this time of year, and they know what they're doing. So make sure you head over. And of course, you can follow Coach if you don't already at Sony, SONI 42. So let's get back to Indiana and the overall resume situation. I saw a tweet out there that right now from Delphi Brackets, according to the situation, at least as of Sunday night, the last 4 buys in the field, according to Delphi, are Wyoming, Michigan, Rutgers, and Miami, Florida. The last 4 in the field in that play-in situation are Xavier, Notre Dame, SMU, and Wake Forest. The first 4 out are VCU, Indiana, Dayton, and Florida. So that's where IU stands right now, Coach. I know you mentioned some of the strengths and weaknesses of IU's resume. One question I had to really dig deeper into the process is this. A few weeks ago, we saw Indiana go to Ohio State, and Indiana was something like a 6 or 7 point underdog, and IU made a roaring second half comeback, led by 4 in the final minute, only to lose by double digits in overtime. And if I know a little bit about the metrics, and I think I know a little bit, they basically look at who you play, where you play them, and how much you won or lost, how much you won or lost by. How, does the committee look at odd game results at all, such as that one where Indiana has that lead in the final minute, and then a team like Ohio State, a really good basketball team, pulls away at the end for a unrealistic final score?
Yeah, the process is this, and we enjoy trying to share the process. The NCAA committee has 12 members. They used to only have 10, and there are 32 conferences who get automatic bids. They assign 2 or 3 conferences to each member for them to watch all year. And so they watch the games in the Big Ten. So the Big Ten has one committee member that's meeting right now in Indianapolis that is so-called expert on the Big Ten, including injuries, game results, who was hot, who was not hot. And so if there's any questions from the other 11 members of the committee about how did Indiana get to their situation, that quote person in charge of that committee will share out some interesting factors. So what you're talking about here is a little bit called the eye test, and they've tried to eliminate the eye test. And that the eye test is you look at a team, they're pretty good. That's where the close losses would probably come in. Is Indiana had close losses, but they played well. They have tried to eliminate that so they can be transparent, and I applaud that. But sometimes a team is just better than their numbers. There is something to that. Although in the NCAA football, it's always going to be Alabama and Clemson and those guys.
I'm so sick of that, Coach. Don't even get me started.
Yeah, it's just the invitational of the Power 6 schools. And so you got to avoid that. What they've done is with the net, and I know that gets a lot of negative play at times, they've tried to include offensive efficiency and defensive efficiency, which takes into play how well you play offensively, points per possession, and defense points per possession. That is closer than the old system of RPI, which was totally who you played, what was their schedule, what was their opponent's schedule. So if you beat Notre Dame when they were 9-1, but they ended up 9-20 because of an injury, Indiana would have gotten penalized in years past. Now the metrics try to put into data the eye test. So if you play well, that has actually helped Indiana and kept them alive. The close games are probably not going to be talked about or discussed a lot, but they do show up in the metrics because their net is 44, and a team that's 18-12 and not played a great schedule might be a lot lower if they didn't play as well, especially defensively. Their defensive efficiency is out of this world great in the 20s, I believe. I haven't checked Ken Palm lately, but their defense has been outstanding. The offense has been a real struggle all year, but combined, it's good enough to get in. And that's where you come with the the close losses, but losses are losses.
I
Every team has them. The Purdue has them. Buzzer beaters happen all the time. And it's hard to say just for Indiana, you're not going to count. You're going to give them a boost because they played well and just lost it late. You got that happening all over the place. Villanova lost a game. They were up 4 with 17 seconds to go and lost a game. It's a loss. So that's how that committee does take into effect those issues, though. And I think they do.
I'm glad you mentioned the fact that conferences have sort of their own representation in the tournament selection. That's something I did not know until literally 2 minutes ago.
I'm not sure it's a conference representative. It's just a member on the committee that knows about the conference.
Knows about the conference. Okay. Thanks for sort of getting the wording right there, because that to me makes me feel a little more comfortable as far as what actually goes into the picking of the 68 teams in the bracket, that there is sort of somebody who watches the Big Ten or watches the ACC or watches the Big 12.
Where it's interesting is like that committee member who's in charge of the Big Ten will know that Indiana suspended 5 players for Northwestern. That loss counts. You can't just take that loss off the record. It counts. But if they get into a discussion about Indiana or Wake Forest, and it's tight, and they say, well, Indiana had 12 losses and Wake Forest had a different number of losses, that committee member could stand up and say, one of those losses, coach was disciplining these players. They played well enough to win, but they didn't get it done. So maybe that's a lot closer than you think, or maybe that puts Indiana in favor. And then it's up to the 12 people to take that information and process whether that means a vote for Indiana or a vote for Wake Forest. You could share that information, but it's up to those 12 people to ultimately process it and then make the decision.
That's fascinating to me, especially because, in college basketball or any sport, really, suspensions happen. A player gets a game here, a game there, you name it, right? But for that Northwestern game, Mike Woodson suspended 5 key players, which does alter the calculus in some way. Of course, it's up to the committee to decide exactly by how much. I see the live chat is hopping right now. We've got people asking questions here. Hey, on an IU basketball note, Coach, Howie asks, what do you think about the lack of offensive ball movement right now to get higher percentage shots with Indiana struggle with outside shooting? Do you have any thoughts on IU basketball's offense?
I'll keep them quick because I think this is a bracket conversation more than an Indiana basketball conversation. Howie, I've been frustrated with the offense. The offense has been rated in the hundreds in KenPom offensive efficiency, and no time in the last 4 years has it been close. I think 89 or 90 at 1 year, the first year of Archie Miller, and then the rest of them were 67 and 70, and we didn't like that offense as a fan base. And this offense is 30 or 40 spots different. It's just shocking to me. That's the one thing I didn't think would happen to a program under Mike Woodson, and whether that's player driven or whether that's coach scheme. Well, I'm not in practice, so I'm usually try to be relatively fair, Howie, on where I put the criticism, but the honest evaluation is our offense hasn't been very good consistently in games from game to game. And that's part of the problem. If we had a higher efficiency, our net would be higher to bring it back to brackets. And maybe our net would be 37, 38 and put us in a little bit better position. And maybe it pulls out a game or two. And if you're 20-10, I think Indiana's in. And that stings as an alum, and that stings as a fan to know that our offense is right around the hundreds. And that's ultimately might be what keeps us out.
For what it's worth, over the last few weeks, Indiana has seen an uptick as far as offensive efficiency is concerned.
I think since Wisconsin game.
So, things are, as everyone knows at this time of year, it's always an ever-changing process, even here as we go into Thursday. Just a heads up, by the way, Michigan has opened as a 1.5 point favorite against Indiana on a neutral site at Gainbridge Fieldhouse Thursday morning, 11:30 Eastern, Big Ten Network. The over-under in that game is 136.5. One final bracket-related question here, Coach. Forrest mentions, Trey Galloway missed 15 games. Rob Finney missed 10. Forrest says that cost Indiana 3 to 4 Big Ten wins. Now, from your perspective, or as you think about how the committee quantifies those absences, how do they go about attaching a number to the news, to the injuries, to the suspensions?
They usually don't attach a number. It goes back to that process of there's someone who is familiar with the Big Ten. Every team's had injuries. Hunter Dickinson was out, and Michigan beat Ohio State. You don't take that win away from Michigan because Hunter Dickinson was out, so you don't just take losses out because a couple of players are out. Indiana, when they're discussed, that will be discussed. That Rob came off the bench and missed some games. Galloway normally was a bench player, started a game and then missed. That will be part of it. And it might play a small role if it's tight, really, really tight. Where injuries matter is VCU, a team that Indiana might be fighting for, played the first 8 games without their point guard, their starting, returning point guard, a very significant piece of the puzzle. They were 4-4, and all of their bad losses, their quad 3 losses, which are negatives, happened without their point guard. When their point guard came back, they are 18-4. And their metrics, their strength of schedule is 65. Indiana's non-conference strength of schedule is 315. So those comparisons still matter, despite the fact that you're correct. Trey Galloway and Rob Finney, if they were healthy and the team was healthy at full strength, I do agree that the number is going to be 1 or 2 or 3, doesn't matter. 1 or 2 or 3 gets Indiana in the tournament. That may be something, but we really can't say for sure there's a number. And we really can't say that the committee listens to it. But the rest of Indiana's resume is not good. And they had an All-American. They had, for the most of the time, their original starting 5 was with them. This is not a different team. And that's the last thing about that question. It's a really good question. They analyze injury as what team is there now. And so they're going to try to get a handle on what is Indiana with everyone. But if Trey Galloway's not healthy, they don't have to answer. They can't answer that. So they're going to have to look at Indiana as if Trey Galloway will not play. So they're going to evaluate that. That's not going to eliminate those losses. They really evaluate it now as that. If that's a big loss, Indiana's not as good a team. That could hurt that Trey Galloway hasn't played. Hopefully in the Big Ten tournament, we're running out of time to see him play. So those are all the little nuances that us bracketologists cannot predict. And that's where we make the quote errors, where we have someone a 7 seed and they're a 9 seed, that some of this information was shared inside that committee room and it's not public information.
There you go. Yeah, folks, you're listening.
Great question.
Yeah, it was a really good question. And I was my brain was starting to catch fire there, melt a little bit as I was thinking about exactly how that plays into the
equation. And the thing, Nathan, is we all know Indiana's injuries, but when you're looking at 75, 80 teams, almost every team, Kofi Coburn was out. There are bumps for injuries. And I think Illinois got some early because Kofi was out, suspended, and Cubello was out. They've played better once they got their full squad back. The committee can see it. We haven't had our full squad back, and so there's going to be some doubt. Every team's had a COVID sit out or a sprained ankle or whatever. If you get to eliminating this game because this game, you take away wins from the other team because they played someone without. There are some that are going to matter and some that won't. Yeah, fair, maybe not, but that's just the way. The way it is.
You even talk about Michigan's fight against Wisconsin, physical fist fight against Wisconsin at the end of that game a couple of weeks ago. All different aspects here as we head into Selection Sunday. Folks, you're listening to the Hoosier Sound. We have Coach Brian Tonsoni on from Delphi Brackets. We see the live chat. If you have questions about Indiana's resume position, about the bracketing process in general, how differentiating factors get considered here over the next few days, drop them in the live chat. We're going to try to get as many as we can here over the next 15 to 20 minutes. Real quick, it's time for Who Won the Week this past week in IU sports. And on Monday night, it was wonderful to see former Hoosier basketball player Victor Oladipo dressed for the Miami Heat, returning after an extended absence after a series of severe leg injuries. And in his first game back against the Rockets, Oladipo had 11 points and 4 assists in just 14 minutes. The Heat won by 17. Oladipo had a couple of highlight reel plays in that game, a flying drive to the hoop for a dunk, a big, I think it was a long distance jumper for his first make. He drew a charge in the first minute or two while he was on the court, showing no ill effects of the injuries. So Oladipo trying to make an impact on this Heat team. He already is off to a good start there. Miami is an NBA title contender, so you may just see Victor Oladipo with an NBA championship ring when it's all said and done after this NBA season. A reminder, if you'd like to subscribe to our podcast for free, all you have to do is search for the Hoosier Sound wherever you listen to podcasts. Stay up to date with all of our information by following us on Twitter at Indiana HQ and at the Hoosier Sound. If you enjoy our show, this is important. Leave us a review, tell a friend, share our links. That kind of support, as well as having Brian Tonsoni on as a guest, really helps us grow this podcast and reach more passionate IU fans such as yourself. Coach, metrics are becoming more and more an integral part of the selection process, or at least we're being made aware of them more now than we have ever before. There are a lot of analytics out there. There's KenPom, there's the net rankings, there's Torvik, there's BPI. How does the selection committee consider these metrics? Is there one that stands out? Is there a composite combination of all of these? And then how much does that weight in the ultimate selection process?
That's a great question. I'm going to say the committee loves the net because that's their creation. And they had some data analysts create that, or whoever way above my pay grade put all the math. But the math takes offensive efficiency and defensive efficiency. It takes a little bit of a scoring margin. It did at one point, and they've tweaked it back and forth a little bit. It takes into effect there's a factor of who you play and the strength of schedule and all of that stuff. The net is not perfect, but it is a lot better than the RPI because it does evaluate how you play offensively and defensively. It can still be gamed because if you play a weak schedule and beat people by 40, your defensive efficiency is going to be solid and your offensive efficiency is going to be solid. If you play a bunch of close games, that could hurt your efficiency. So I still think there's some tweaking that needs to be done, but it is that transparency of the eye test. Instead of 12 people just saying we like Oklahoma over Villanova or whatever it would be, they have some metrics to use, but the net is their favorite. And I do think it plays a role in seeding and maybe even selection at some point. When we look at trends over the 2 years that it's been net, 2019, 2021, and in all honesty, Nathan, only 2019 was a full year. Last year, not everyone played a non-conference schedule, so you can't really see that. But there are some trends with your higher nets getting your first, 4 or 5 seed lines. Your 40s, and if you're in the high 30s, 40s, and 50s, you're going to be 8, 9, or 10, despite the number of wins in quad 1 and quad 2. So I think the net is the answer. But on the team sheet, they have some strength of record. They have KPI, which are more record based, who you won, who you beat, and who you played. And then you have some predictive measures, which are offensive and defensively, which are BPI, which I don't like because it's driven by ESPN, and I think they have some flavor for their schools that they cover. That's just a personal problem. So I dismiss BPI because they put it on TV as that's the ranking system. It's not. It's the net, but that's ESPN. Then they have Sagarin, which has been known in sports for a long time, and then they have KenPom. And I think the role that it plays is into breaking ties. I think it's still, you got to beat people. You got to have some wins and some losses given your opportunities. That's another part that I've learned since doing this. Your VCU is only going to have maybe 10 opportunities against quad 1 and 2. If they're 500, is that equal to Indiana having 18 or 19 opportunities and only winning 1/3 of them? But the number is higher for Indiana than it is for VCU. Not sure how the committee looks at that. We think we have a handle on that. But the metrics are used to kind of break and make sure that the net is like Iowa for right now. It only has 2 quad 1 wins. That's not good enough for a 6 seed or a 7 seed normally. They have enough quad 2, but their metrics, the net's 15. So now you go to KenPom. Now you go to Sagarin. Now you go to strength of record to try to explain why do they only have 2 wins against good teams, but their offensive efficiency. And then you look into the team sheet and you see the individual records. That's where the metrics play. And I think that's better, again, because of transparency. We bracketologists can try to figure that out instead of just 12 people in a room saying, we like this team, and we have no data to back it up. I think even though we will disagree on Selection Sunday with certain teams being in and out, and Jay Billis will go crazy on ESPN, I do think it's a lot more fair. And once we started doing this, I really understood the seeding process. As a fan, I'd always get mad. My team got, a bad seed and all that. I think the committee with its task and rules does what they're tasked to do for the most part. And it's not an easy process.
Well, that's one thing that I've learned so far in 25, 30 minutes here talking to you, Coach. Indiana, by the way, one strength, as you pointed out earlier, in their resume is their net ranking when you compare them among the other teams in the field. So, of course, Indiana's got to win basketball games starting with Thursday. And you agree with this too, right, Coach? If Indiana loses, no doubt they are out of consideration.
Yes. If Indiana loses Thursday morning, there is no chance. Done. I think Indiana's in. I think even those bracketologists that have them last team in or second last team in will drop them.
Okay, there we go. I wanted confirmation there. Good to know. And then, of course, with a win, now we start talking about, okay, what's the conversation like? Again, as Coach mentioned earlier, Indiana has 3 quad 1 wins right now. A win over Michigan will give them a 4th, and at least you have a greater bargaining chip at the table when you consider all the other criteria as well. Now, as an outsider, one narrative that is, I feel like, very pervasive this time of year is that recency matters a lot. What do you do in your last 5 games? What do you do in your last 10 games? Pick whatever number you want. First of all, does how you play at the end of the season matter? And second of all, does the committee, based on recent history, does the committee lean on how you play late in the season more or less than they should?
That's a great question, and it's one that's we all misunderstand somewhat. It used to be on the team sheet was your last 10 games, 12 games, and your record was a comparison, a piece of data you compared inside the committee room. That was taken off 5 or 6, 7 years ago, maybe longer than that. They are really big in total body of work. So your first game on November 9th will mean just as much as Thursday's game. Now, I like the media because I'm now a part of it, but ESPN wants you to think that every game this week is like worth 10 different spots, right? And that's one of the things that these are good tournaments because they're good to watch, and they might make a difference in a seed line or two here or there, or a team getting in. I think it's more about teams playing well than or teams playing themselves out of positions and teams really moving out or up and in. But it's a body of work. That is a term that is used in the committee, and that's one that's hard to understand. Now, in those discussions, if I'm a voter and I'm looking at Rutgers, I think I would take into consideration, they lost games in November and now they're playing really well here. So if it's a close thing and they've met some requirements elsewhere, then I'm going to kind of say, okay, Rutgers gets my vote. So I think recency does play a mind in the evaluation of each individual committee member. It's not an official criteria, and I think they're even urged to try to stay away from it as much as possible. What you've done in your last 5 games, what you do in the conference tournament, what you do is not more important than November games. But I do think that's an important piece. What team? Dayton lost its first 3 games at home to start the season.
They did.
And then went to beat Kansas. And then went on to beat someone else.
Neutral site win.
Neutral site win. And then they beat Belmont, I think, or I don't have it called up.
You're right.
So their record since those 3 losses is tremendous. And that's why we have them first 4 out as being heavily considered. And then people say, well, you have 3 quad 4 losses, but they were in November. So I think while that's not official, you still are evaluating the strength of the team. Is Dayton a better basketball team right now? Yes. Are they one of the top 68? Maybe. Total body of work, they had those losses, but there's a chunk of that time. VCU is the same thing with early in the year without their point guard. All of their losses are in. What have they done lately? I do think it plays a role in the minds. It would if I was in the committee, even though it wasn't official. And then the other way, Michigan State's been losing games. Iowa State's been losing games.
There you go.
Xavier's been losing games. I don't think you can kick them out because you just had a 4 or 5 game losing streak, but you really did a lot of good work early. Like Xavier has 5 quad 1 wins. I think Michigan State has 11 total quad 1 and 2.
Mm-hmm.
They earned those victories. You can't whitewash them away because they've lost now and just drop them out of the tournament. It probably affects their seeding more than their selection in or out.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing here, Coach, is that whether it's in November or in March, in the regular season or in conference tournament play, it seems like big wins carry more weight than bad losses. Is that too sweeping of a conclusion to make there? What are your thoughts as far as that statement is concerned?
Man, I wish we could know that answer for sure. We debate that back and forth all the time.
Yeah, because I do see the comments you made on Dayton and on Rutgers, because some of those losses are really bad, right? Dayton, guys, has lost to UMass Lowell, Lipscomb, and Austin Peay.
They're
all
awful.
At home. All at home. Like, I know Indiana fans were upset that the Hoosiers lost to Rutgers last week at home. That's Indiana's worst loss this year. When you look at Dayton, right, you have those really ugly ones. Rutgers, right, you lose to Lafayette at home. You lose to UMass. You lose to DePaul. And in those 2 instances specifically, I don't believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that injuries or suspensions were in play.
Right.
So what are your thoughts as far as that's concerned? Big wins versus bad losses. Is it the timing that matters? I'm curious to hear from your perspective.
I think bad losses can be excused if you have good wins.
Okay.
So I think the Kansas and the Belmont win kind of will erase those 3 quad 4 wins, especially late in the bracket. What I mean, the 10, 11, 12 seed line for inclusion. If you're trying to pick that last couple of teams and you have a Dayton team that gets to the championship of the A10, picks up another couple more quad 1 wins, I think that happens. Although the no losses in quad 3 or 4 is a plus for Indiana. Wake Forest, the team they're battling for in that last 4 spots, has the same thing. I think that has to matter too. But Nathan, here's the problem with our Hoosiers. You didn't schedule well.
Yeah.
So the committee can sit there and say, you have the 315th toughest out of 353. Toughest non-conference schedule.
Yeah, and you're not exaggerating, Coach. You're not exaggerating. It's actual facts, you guys. Like 315.
Yeah. So when you look at, I think Dayton's in the hundreds, maybe non-conference, and committee says the non-conference you control. Your overall strength of schedule is going to be dependent on the conference. Do you get an easy conference in the, they're not all equal round robin anymore. The unbalanced schedule in the conferences, that does play a part too. But you, Indiana, and you, Dayton, can schedule your non-conference. And so, you have all these wins, but they weren't against really quality people. And that's where the difference between Michigan and Indiana is. And people get upset, like Indiana's record's better, but Michigan has the 32nd best non-conference schedule. They scheduled tough and they got beat. So those losses, are they bad? But it's better to play tough people and lose than it is to play a bunch of 200 sub nets and cupcakes and get wins. And I think Indiana might pay the price for it. I think I counted we've been doing it for 8 years. We missed a year from COVID. So 7 years, I think only 5 teams with at-large bursts had non-conference strength of schedule over 300.
Wow.
So you're looking at a Wake Forest right now. SMU's in the 280s, 290s. That may hurt SMU, but it's going to hurt Indiana as well. When you look at Oregon has a below 50 or below 60, that could be a surprise team. That Rutgers has 280, things like that. So it's bothered the committee in the past. We'll see. The difference with Rutgers is they have 6 or 7 quad 1 wins. Indiana has 3, and good quad 1 wins, like 4 ranked teams. Indiana only has 2. So do you erase the losses of Rutgers and a bad schedule? That's the beauty of bracketology, that we don't really know.
Absolutely. I think that is the art, right, of Selection Sunday of this week compared to a more scientific, exact process. How about this question from Josh in the live chat, Coach? He says, of all the different criteria you can consider, is there one big differentiating factor between 2 teams when choosing for who gets a higher seed line? And does it matter in the top of the field versus the bubble area of the field? I'm curious to get your thoughts.
Seeding can be looked at differently than inclusion or selection. Those are two separate things, because what the committee is doing starting tonight is voting teams in. Yep. And you vote teams in regardless of what seed you are, and then they go later and they seed them. So it could be two separate processes. For us, and traditionally it's been this, Nathan, you got to beat people. So your quad ones and your quad twos are what you look at first. But when you look at some of the results in the past, why does a team with 12 quad one wins, why are they a 2 seed, and a Gonzaga with a 6 quad one? 12 is better than 6 ever since my elementary math, which was in, like 1970. 12 is greater than 6. So why don't, but the hardest thing for us, and I think for fans, is that college basketball is not a scoreboard other than your conference standings. The selection of the tournament teams is not, you're a game and a half back. If you win 2 games, you're going to automatically jump up. It is that body of work. So for us, Josh, we look at quad one and quad two together as a barometer. And then if it's close, then we might go to the team with the highest number of quad one wins. And then ultimately we go to the net, because that is the overall offensive efficiency, defensive efficiency. We are having a debate right now about the last number one. There only once, and I'm not sure, only once has a double-digit ranking system, RPI or net, been in the top 2 seeds. Right now we have Auburn as the last number 1 seed with a 10 net. We don't think there's been a 1 seed that has had a double-digit sorting ranking ever. Does that play a role because of the metrics when you have Kentucky at 4, you have Villanova at 6, but all the other metrics point to Auburn, but the trend is a little different. So we look at quad 1 and quad 2, and then we look at the net, which is basically offensive and defensive efficiency. That tells you how you play. And I think the net puts you in in categories. These 8 teams, these 12 teams are all bunched together in those categories. And then you try to sort out road wins, non-conference. And we spend a lot of time trying to figure out the formula to do what Josh is asking. Yeah. What are we going to do this year? What are we going to value? What do we think the committee valued last year? What did they value in 2019? What's our formula going to be? But I think that's where we're going to end up now, and we've done in the past. And it's been a debate. We get some talks in bracketology world that the net's not that important. And I argue, and I get shot down a lot. I think we did really well last year because we kind of used the net, and I think the committee likes it. That's my evaluation until I'm proven different. I'm going to think the net is very valuable in seeding. A TCU, for example, is probably going to be a 9 seed because they're 46 net when their resume could put them up as far as a 6 or a 7 with the number of wins. So I think the net is a determining factor.
Good to know there, Coach. Definitely fascinating to consider all the different factors.
It's a lot of nerdy stuff. I hope I'm not boring your listeners.
But at the end of the day, March Madness is when all the eyes, right, are on college basketball. And so, how do those teams get picked into the field? Well, that's exactly what you're talking about. Real quick, it's time for a social media shout out. And hey, we'd be remiss if we didn't tip our cap to the IU women's basketball team. What a weekend they had in Indianapolis, winning 3 games to get into the Big Ten tournament championship game, knocking off Rutgers, Maryland, and Ohio State. Maryland, by the way, had made the Big Ten tournament title game in each of the 7 years that they were in the conference, until Indiana knocked them off on Friday. The Hoosiers fell to Iowa on Sunday in the title game. It was an unbelievable atmosphere. It really came through on TV at Gainsbridge Fieldhouse in Indianapolis. How about Grace Berger and Nicole Cardano-Hillary, who made the All Big Ten tournament team? Cardano-Hillary really impressed me over the weekend on both sides of the court. She was incredible in defending Iowa superstar Caitlin Clark on Sunday night. Ultimately, what Indiana did over the weekend is pretty significant. They, for all intents and purposes, clinched the opportunity, barring a miracle, to host the first 2 rounds of the NCAA tournament coming up. So Indiana, again, unless there's a real plot twist here in the days to come, will host the round of 64 and the round of 32 at Assembly Hall. Of course, keep your eyes out for details here. Selection Sunday for the women is on Sunday night. It used to be on a Monday. It's now Sunday this year. So Sunday night, 8 Eastern, they'll release the bracket and the matchups and the venues. Can't wait to see where IU ends up. By the way, the Hoosiers moved up 4 spots in the AP poll from 15 to 11 based on their performance over the course of the last week. Make sure, once again, you give us a follow if you haven't already at Indiana HQ, at the Hoosiers Sound. We're going to have boots on the ground in Indianapolis and throughout the rest of the season, wherever Indiana goes. Hopefully it's the NCAA tournament and not the NIT. We'll see how this all plays out. We're at Indiana HQ and at the Hoosiers Sound on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. We're Indiana.HQ on Instagram. On this show, we have Brian Tonsoni joining us from Delphi Brackets. You can follow them at Delphi Brackets on Twitter. That's DELPHI. You can follow Coach at Sony42, SONI42. Coach, let's dive right back in for our final segment here. I know right now in Hoosier Nation, there's a lot of here we go again. It seems like an ending of the season very similar to last year or 2 years ago, especially 3 years ago. There's no way that previous years matter as far as this season's tournament selection, right? Even if it's as something as simple as benefit of the doubt, that's not part of the consideration. Am I correct?
Yeah, it's a brand new year every year. They don't look at who has played well. You've had probably some situations, I can't recall them right off the top of my head, where a champion doesn't make it the next year because they don't qualify. So yeah, it's a clean slate every season. I do wonder, like with VCU had the COVID thing last year, they got selected and then had COVID and had to go home and didn't play. If that's down to 2 teams in VCU, subliminally subliminally, do they vote for VCU to get them back in because they had an unfortunate pause? I don't think that's the case, but that's the only situation where I can think that something that happened previous might play a role.
Yeah, I was really excited to watch VCU in the tournament last year. Yep. Bones Highland was a really underrated mid-major player who didn't have the chance to play. Now he's doing really well with Denver in the NBA. Fascinating. Yeah, before Loyola won the Missouri Valley title game, that was a bit of an inspiration to that question too, because we've seen Loyola do so well in the tournament. You know, does that maybe help their argument, hurt some others? Bottom line, you're saying doesn't matter. Clean slate. Of course, Loyola won their way in, which is what I'm sure a lot of IU fans want the Hoosiers to do coming up here Thursday, Friday, and or beyond. Now, something else that's interesting to me, Coach, is when you look back at the recent history of the first 4, teams like UCLA, for example, there's been Syracuse over the last few years as well. Teams that are from high major power conferences have shown a surprising level of success getting into the first 4 and then winning beyond that, right? UCLA made the Final Four last year. Syracuse made a trip to the Sweet 16 in 2018. USC won a tournament game back in 2017, around a 64 game, I should say. Does that create some sort of implicit bias in the selection committee that when you're talking about these first 4 teams, could a power conference team get a bit of a nod just because of the success of teams like UCLA or Syracuse in the recent past?
I really don't think so. I think the voting process is very fair. It's really complicated how they put teams into consideration by vote. Then they vote on teams, and then there's 8 teams, and then only 4 of those you got to have a certain number of votes to be moved onto the board. And basically the final 4 are the 4 teams that are selected last. That's by rule. You can't even, if you put them in and all of a sudden you say, okay, UCLA is better than our other 11, we're going to move them up and another team down. It is technically, I believe by rule, the last 4 teams that are voted in. So if it's a Power 5, it just happens. Now there are some analysts out there who think you purposely wait to vote in UCLA, Michigan State for ratings. But here's why that happens from a coaching standpoint. You get to play on Tuesday, and then, you have a quick turnaround on Thursday, but you've already gotten the butterflies out of playing a one-and-done situation, right? So if you're 11 seed playing a 6 seed, there really isn't that much difference. You're talking about the 24th overall team, maybe 21st overall team playing the 44th team. when you get to this, everyone in the tournament can win games. Not every team can win 6, but almost every team in seed 1 through 12. So maybe for all of the people listening, when you get your bracket pool next Monday, pick the winner, of a play-in game, because as you said, historically that has advanced. I think it has to do with you've got that win, you've got a little confidence, you're not nervous. You ever playing with house money at that point, and that favorite, that 5 seed, if it's a 12 seed play-in or the 6 seed, it's not that far away from you, and you've gotten some of that out of the way. I think that's more than anything else. And I don't think the committee, there's another thought about the committee makes matchups, but it's all region, it's all travel distance and all of that. So when you see an Indiana, Kentucky kind of in the same region in the past, that wasn't the coach or trying to make a matchup of some sort of for ratings. It just happens that way.
Yeah, makes sense. Now I know, Coach, for you at Delphi Bracketology on Wednesday, we're recording this on Tuesday night. On Wednesday, you're going to do a major scrub of the bracket and then publish what one of your projected brackets up to your website here on Friday, as far as the next updated bracket is concerned. So folks listening, you can keep your eyes out for that. One thing I'm curious about here, Coach, is we talked about the last 4 in, first 4 out right now. Xavier, Notre Dame, SMU, Wake Forest, VCU, Indiana, Dayton, Florida. Here's a question. Is there a team this week during conference tournament play that no one is talking about below those first 4 out that could play their way in with a crazy good week that doesn't include actually winning the whole conference tournament?
Well, there's actually several, but they're going to have to win 2 or 3.
Okay.
A team like Oklahoma. Oklahoma 17-14, not a really good record, too many losses. They play Baylor in the first round. If they beat Baylor, that's a number 1 seed. They're now 18-14 with their 4th quad 1 win. They're 4-11 in quad 1. It's not good. They have 6 quad 2 wins. Then if they beat Texas or whoever's the 4 or 5 seed, they can end up 19-15 with 5 quad 1 wins, and no one's thinking about them. But you got Virginia Tech, who has a 37 net. So if you're Indiana, go to we don't have all that listed. Text me. I'll tell you the teams, 5 through 12. But we have teams like Florida, Texas A&M, St. Louis, Oregon has beat UCLA twice and USC once. They have some good wins that if they get to the Pac-12 championship, the committee might say at 19-14 or something like that, they have the quality wins to get in. So when we say there are like 7 teams for 3 spots, that is if the season ended today. But we are keeping an eye on about 12 teams. But a lot of those teams have to win multiple games in their conference tournament.
Wonderful. Great to hear. That's exactly what I'm sure Indiana fans are dreading to hear, but that's fine. I think
Indiana's at this level, and then Oregon's right below them. Oregon has to win 1 more game than Indiana.
And it's a whole different conversation.
But let me answer this. We think Notre Dame, SMU, and Wake Forest are right there with Indiana and VCU. So if you're an Indiana fan, root against those 4 to lose as early as possible. And I think Indiana then has a path with 1 win against Michigan to possibly get in, because you have to have 68 teams. I don't know that Indiana is going to be worthy, Nathan, but if those teams lose, because those 3 teams have 2, 2, and 1 quad 1 wins, and Indiana has 3. They have some better strength of schedule. They have better situations elsewhere. Mm-hmm. But if Indiana beats Michigan and gets that 4th, they could have a path. It's a long shot with 1 win. With 2 wins, I think they really push the metric to be considered. So I'm leaning on 2 wins, but those are the teams. Xavier has 5. Indiana has to do some damage to get equal to Xavier. So that's where we sit. Root against those teams, Indiana fans.
Yeah, that's easy enough, right? Yeah, you can head over to delphibracketology.com/bracketology to see the most updated bracket. You can also click around website. A lot of great content over at delphibracketology.com. Let's wind down with this question here, Coach. Let's get it on the record here, okay? We talked about it a few moments ago. If Indiana loses, game over, no conversation. If Indiana wins 1, how would you term it? You would say they're in the discussion, they're in the mix. Is that how you would say it?
I would say I'm not really good at putting percentages on it, but
Okay.
I think you're in the discussion if you win one and some of those other teams lose, and then it's going to come down to what the committee values. I still think that non-conference schedule is scary to be the last team selected.
And then there's a lot of there's a lot of external factors here as far as who's playing, how many times they win. But if Indiana, coach, beats Michigan, and if then on Friday they beat Illinois, does that lock the Hoosiers into the field of 68, or do we need to see the other results?
No, but you're a little more excited to watch the selection show if Indiana wins too. I think there's probably a decent shot that they get in, but the only lock would be to win the Big Ten tournament. If you get to the championship game, you've won what? Three?
Yeah, you've won three, exactly.
Yeah, Michigan, Illinois, then the semifinal. If you get to the championship game, you're sitting with 6 quad ones with no bad losses, and the net's going to move up a little bit. I think that really is good. So maybe I'm not saying Indiana has to win it, but 2 is a lot better than 1. 1 is the loneliest number. Great song, by the way. I digress. 1 small path to get in with 1, in my opinion. A much bigger path with 2, and an outstanding path if you get to the championship game.
Wonderful. Coach, as we wind down here on Tuesday night, any final thoughts, any closing thoughts from your end on the bracketing process? Any words for Hoosier Nation? The floor is yours.
I'm just going to compliment you guys. You know, I've popped in quite a bit with your podcasts, and my world gets busy coaching high school basketball. I don't get in as often enough, but you guys do a really good job at Indiana HQ. I know Rob helps us out with our webpage at Delphi Bracketology. We so appreciate that. So my final comments are just a compliment. Hoosier Nation is just blessed with a lot of different media, a lot of different podcasts, and each group has their own niche, and you guys have developed a really good thing here. And I'm proud to call you a fellow IU podcasters, right? No, so it's an honor to be on your show. It's Indiana again, Nathan. We love it. We struggled through football. We're struggling through basketball, but you're not going to get me to change my basement. For those of you listening, it's all cream and crimson. I love Indiana University. I'll root for them on Thursday. And if they lose, we'll just move on to baseball or
the women's team.
I'm sorry, I did not want to
No, I know
the women's team is something really to watch. But you know, I'm excited. I want to retire down there, Nathan, and go to volleyball and softball and wrestling. That's how much Indiana means to me. And it's hard at Delphi Brackets when you got to make a data decision against your team, you know.
I know.
And what's funny is we were accused online the other day of being Purdue homers. Someone didn't know my connection and said that the group is Purdue homers. But no, I root for Indiana. I'm hoping they make the tournament. It's been too long since we've seen their name on the bracket. And if it doesn't happen this year, we wish Coach Woodson and staff a lot of luck in recruiting and developing players, and let's get after it next year.
Absolutely. No, thank you for the kind words. I am so impressed at how Delphi has done here as far as becoming a major bracketology force over the last few years. Can't wait to see what Indiana does. I have 3 degrees from the school, so I'm locked at the hip at this point. Nothing I can really do now. But that about wraps it up for our 243rd show of the Hoosier Sound. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your support. Thank you to our live audience. You're all beautiful people. To hear more fantastic episodes like the one you heard today, be sure to follow us at Indiana HQ and at the Hoosier Sound to make sure you don't miss any in the future. You can also go to our website, indianahq.com, to find it all in one place. But as always, thank you for listening, Hoosier Nation, and we will see you next time.